Over the last 5 years, I've learned a lot about investing in sports cards. I've made some great deals and some pretty bad ones as well. And I've taken everything I've learned and I've updated my sports card investing strategy. I'm about to give it to you right now for the first time, as well as talk through it with an expert from my sports card investor team so we can both hear what they think. Hello, and here we go. Welcome to a new episode of the Geoff Wilson Show. I have a very special guest today. Teapot, thank you for joining me today.
I feel like I have made it now. I was photobombing a Card Kids video recently, and now I've finally made it onto the Geoff Wilson Show. So it's really good to be here. Kelly does a great job. I'm going to try to bring the same energy.
Kelly does do a great job. She's a wonderful co-host on this show, but I invited you today into this seat specifically because we're going to dive deep into sports card investing strategy. And I thought no better person to tell me that I'm crazy than you.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Especially when I make statements like the one I'm about to make.
Okay. All right. I'm ready. Yeah. You have not told me anything. You said, I'm not going to tell you a word. So I'm waiting.
I think Patrick Mahomes is a bad investment right now in the short term. That's just one of many controversial statements I might be saying here over the next few minutes. And we're going to get Teapot's reaction. Of course, let me explain why I feel that.
Of course.
Let me get into my philosophy here. But as you said, you haven't seen this before. And I spent quite a bit of time putting together a bunch of thoughts and observations from the sports card world, from doing my own investing over the last 5 years, from making money on some cards, losing money on some cards, watching what the market has done, studying the charts and graphs of other players. And I've distilled this down into essentially a strategy that I am now utilizing when I'm purchasing cards going forward. And I've been utilizing bits of this now for the last several months. But in particular, as we go into the National this year, I'm going to be shopping for a lot of cards at the National. This is going to help provide clarity and direction for me in terms of what I'm targeting.
Okay.
So a couple of thoughts right off the bat, and I want to get obviously your reaction to all of this as we go. So first of all, one general observation is football seems to be as hot as it can be right now.
Yeah, agreed.
There seems to have been this real refocusing of the sports card market on football cards over the last couple of years. It seems to be just the hot thing. Most kids seem to be into football cards. So, I mean, that's part of, what's kind of interesting about this and looking towards the future of sports cards. But obviously football is obviously the most watched sport in America by far.
Yep.
And it just seems to continue to get more popular.
Yep.
Build on its lead over the other sports. And that was never really the case with cards. And, there's different reasons people have said for that over time, such as, quarterbacks are mainly the collectible position,
Yep.
Maybe a little bit running backs and wide receivers, but most other positions are not collectible. The players wear helmets. You don't get to know them as well. The players aren't marketed individually the way that they are maybe in the NBA and other sports. So there's maybe some things that have worked against football card collecting historically. But would you agree that right now it seems like we're almost kind of entering this renaissance period for football?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like every time I'm at a show, I ask kids, what do you collect? Football, football, football. Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow. All the kids love Joe Burrow and all of them love football. And I've kind of speculated, on my own what might be the cause of this. When I was a kid in the 90s, and you're a little older than I am, football cards they were like the last sport being collected other than hockey, right? I think we're making our way through that period of the childhood collectors having rediscovered the hobby. And now many of them are re-engaging with their children, and their kids are into football. And I think there's a paradigm shift happening. I've talked in the past about the evolution of the card collector and how you kind of change your seasons and start collecting and going after different things. And football seems to be emerging as a front runner to kind of take over.
For this reason, I've started placing a lot more emphasis on football cards in my collecting. And we'll talk about some of that. And I'm still buying certainly the other sports as well,
yeah.
But I'm placing more emphasis on football. I am also placing some emphasis on soccer. And I continue to believe that if you look 30 years out into the future, that soccer card collecting in this country is going to be way multiples of what it is today. Now, we've actually seen the soccer card market go down quite a bit over the last year to 2 years.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people saying a couple of years ago, like, oh, soccer's the next big thing. And so in 2020 and 2021, you actually saw soccer rise faster than any of the other sports in terms of prices and people buying the cards and everything. We've also now seen it fall backwards at a pace that in some cases has eclipsed the other sports as well, because I think people, realized there was just a lot of hype that was driving the market then. And while soccer, I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I agree that soccer makes a good long-term bet, but they're not willing to wait long-term. Most people are not willing to buy a card and actually sit on it for 20 years to see if they're right.
Yeah.
They want to buy a card. And so if you're doing a, more short-term activity, then we haven't seen a lot in the soccer card market the last 12 to 24 months that would indicate that that's a great place to be doing short-term activity, because most prices have slid back. I still maintain that if you want to buy absolutely key cards today and then believe that those, like, what's going to maximize your value 20 or 30 years from now, I still think some of the early Messi cards, I've been scooping some of these up recently. I just bought his 2006 World Cup Panini PSA 10. Beautiful card, by the way. I got to show it to you. And the Germany World Cup that year, really low population, low price. I mean, if that same card existed in any of the other major U.S. sports, it would probably be 10x what it is in soccer. I really want to get his 2004 Mega Cracks PSA 10. I would love to get that. I've got the Autografo. I've got some of the other variants of that, but I'm kind of building a little Messi collection. I'm not going to go super deep with soccer, but my thoughts with soccer are early Messi, early Pele, which I know you've been on for a couple of years, Maradona, Ronaldo, Mbappe. If you want to take a risk on a newer guy, maybe Haaland. I guess Mbappe is a newer guy as well, but he's already more established on the international scene with the World Cup appearances and whatnot. I think, to me, all of those names are going to be really relevant in the card collecting world, 30 years down the road.
I think you're hitting on something really important with soccer, which I believe in strongly right now, and that is focus on the best players. We say that about a lot of sports, but soccer in particular, fans tend to be club loyal or national team loyal or both, some variety of the two. And these players transfer and switch teams so often in soccer. Kelly and I were just talking about this last week. They shift around, they move teams. That makes it hard to build fan loyalty to individual players for many people, because, I was super excited when Lukaku came to Chelsea, and before I knew it, he was already gone. It was like this failed experiment that didn't work out as part of this unraveling of Chelsea in general right now. And so I still like Lukaku, but I'm looking at Chelsea and saying I'm a fan. I think the top two guys in every generation are the safest bets. And right now, that's for sure Mbappe and Erling Haaland. Haaland went absolutely nuclear this year, broke the scoring record, and his cards are actually down in price last I checked. That was about a week ago. Unless there's been a shift that I'm not aware of, he's trending down in spite of blowing up. And I think it's everything to do with the shift in the eyes being off of soccer right now. If you're projecting forward even a couple of years toward World Cup, those two guys, even though Haaland, unfortunately, at least as of right now, doesn't have the probability of playing in the World Cup, there's talk that he could be eligible for the UK, for England, if he stays there long enough, which would be kind of weird. But I think your strategy is right. Pele, Maradona, maybe a few other all-time greats from vintage: Messi, Ronaldo, Haaland, Mbappe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I definitely have my eyes on those for sure. It's interesting because, you talked about just like kind of the absolute great players. A lot of my strategy has shifted, especially when I'm looking at retired players. A lot of my strategy has shifted really around that. We're going to get into that in a minute, but let's start by talking about current players. So the first part of this, I want to talk about players who are currently playing. I am now looking, for the most part, at players who are currently playing only from the short term. So I believe that, if you're looking at active players today, and there may be a few exceptions to this when you're looking at like a LeBron or a Steph Curry, but there's even some concern there, which we'll talk about. But I believe for the most part, if you're buying players who are currently playing today, those are not cards that you want to be holding long term. I believe this for the most part. I believe that you're better off treating that as short-term speculation, flipping, short-term investment, get in and get out with your money, get in and get out when they get hot. It fluctuates so much, and there's so many examples of players who reach the pinnacle and only to see their cards go down
Yeah.
after they've reached the pinnacle.
Yep.
And so to me, the opportunity with current players really lies in a couple of categories. So first of all, buying up and coming players who still have upside ahead of them because they haven't reached the pinnacle yet, right? And some of this may seem obvious, but some of this is, I'm really narrowing into these specific areas, right?
Okay.
And I also want to say, as I'm talking about this is all coming from the standpoint of investing and making money. This is not coming from the standpoint of building out a PC.
Sure.
I have a large PC. I will be buying and I have bought and will continue to buy many cards that are not ones that I'm going to talk about during this episode today because I like them and because I want them for my PC. I'm strictly right now thinking about things from a appreciation on investment standpoint. So let me preface that. Buying up and coming players with upside. So I think your first category there, your best category, is players who did not come into their respective league with super high expectations, but who have become surprising stars and have a lot of upside ahead of them, right? So, I mean, you could go back to Mike Trout as an example of this. Did not come in he was a first round draft pick, but late first round, not super high expectations. Giannis is a good example of this, 15th overall pick in the draft, which still sounds high, but in NBA terms, there's actually not a ton of expectations on pick number 15.
Yep.
Jokic, 41st pick in the draft, right? Jalen Hurts, more recent example, 53rd pick in the NFL draft. These are players who did not have big expectations on them coming in, have surpassed all expectations as to what anybody thought that they could achieve. If you can find those types of players early in their career, very speculative, you're very much placing a bet, but that offers potentially the most upside, but also, a high amount of risk with it as well.
I'm going to throw a caveat or a qualifier on that.
Sure.
Some nuance. I think almost all rookies, at least right now, last 2 to 3 years that are coming out, are all overpriced. Every single one of them. These rookie cards are going for so much money out of the gate. Wax prices are super high. Buying into breaks is super expensive. And then all these players are coming out and they're very expensive. The video I did a few weeks ago, I think the sweet spot is finding the ones who haven't quite emerged for one reason or another into year, let's say 3 or 4, when everybody's kind of forgotten about them. They've moved on to the next new rookies or to the guys who are already established. And that's why this year we saw a guy like Jalen Brunson's cards blow up. We even saw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's cards blow up.
I put him in that.
We saw De'Aaron Fox's cards because he started winning.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw Mikal Bridges blow up in the second half of the season when he got traded and became the guy with the Nets. And so I think there's a timing aspect. If you start speculating too early, I'm focusing on basketball right now. Football could be a little different. If we think back to the last few years, I'm just going to throw like Davis Mills out there and say, if you still believed right now somehow Davis Mills is going to be maybe Davis Mills is my new Will Greer. If Davis Mills, you think he's going to be the guy right now with the whole quarterback situation with CJ Stroud and everything else, then now I'm sure you can get his cards at a fraction of the price that you could when his rookie cards first came out.
100%.
I don't think Davis Mills is that guy, but that's the first person who came to mind. So I'd be looking in that ballpark. Baseball is a totally different animal with prospects and everything, but I think generally your principle is pretty good on that.
That's a good point. And by the way, I'm taking notes here because that's the whole reason why I'm doing this live with Teapot is I want to get his feedback and take notes to further refine the strategy. But I think you're right on that. There are a lot of rookies that come out really high out of the gate. Sometimes the best opportunities are those who sink a little bit before they really, start to go up the mountain. The other type of rookie or young player who I do think is investable, but it's difficult, is players who do have very high expectations, but go on to, live up to or surpass those expectations. And this is tough. You're talking Joe Burrow. Has done that so far. You're talking Jason Tatum is living up to that right now. Maybe Trevor Lawrence will. Last year, people started to see that, but the expectations are really, really high. Shohei Ohtani is living up to that, right? But then for every one of those guys, you got a whole bunch of Zions who maybe someday still will live up to expectations, but right now looks like he can't stay healthy and can't stay on the court. LaMelo Ball, injury issues, teams underperformed. and even Luka,
Yeah.
With how the team ended this year.
Absolutely.
So this is a tough category to invest in players in, because that player's really got to be great. Like if you're going to go after a, top 10 rookie pick, cards are unbelievably hyped, everybody's chasing them, you've really got to be right with your pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's 100% correct. A lot of these guys, I talk about upside versus downside, right? Floor versus ceiling all the time. That's how my mind thinks about it. And I think in probabilities. So if I'm, stacking cards up, you can take different approaches. I did a video a year ago on diversifying your portfolio. You don't have to diversify. You can go all in on one or two guys. This year I shifted, and I believed so much in Shohei Ohtani, and I still do, that I went almost exclusively into Shohei Ohtani, because I just felt like when I look at the landscape, I feel very confident that, barring any injury, knock on wood, he's going to be the guy and will continue to be. And he just has a different level of potential. So to your point, you find those guys, you find the ones who are going to be the guy, and especially if they haven't quite surpassed. Like in the case of Tatum versus Luka, right? Is there a point, if the Celtics go and win the championship this year, and Tatum continues to play like he has, and Luka's situation continues to be in flux, that gap's going to close really quickly, or even pass, with Tatum becoming that new leading indicator for the league.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. Yeah, I think these are all great points. So those are all good things to look at. Personally, I still think Jalen Hurts has upside. We've talked about this. You did a great episode on the Market Movers channel just recently, where you talked about the potential upside of Hurts and his prices still being perhaps a little low compared to some of his contemporary quarterbacks, the other top 5 quarterbacks in the league. Eagles had a great draft. I like Hurts upside. Couple of those guys who are more in the players without super high expectations, maybe they'll break out, but it's a big risk. I kind of like Desmond Ritter's chances here in Atlanta. They're putting a lot of offensive weapons around him. No one seems to be paying attention to him. Like, no one's talking about Desmond Ridder cards right now.
Yep.
What kind of improvement can Atlanta show? What kind of quarterbacks he's going to be?
Yeah.
Could totally flame out. My heart is also, of course, with Kyle Trask in Tampa. I think he's going to get his chance. I love Kyle Trask. I don't know how that's going to turn out for him down in Tampa, so I'm not necessarily advocating him, but I do think Ritter's in that category of players without super high expectations who could become stars. It'll be interesting to watch this year.
I think a guy like Ritter, I get a little spooked around that. If I were holding Ritter cards right now, I'd be holding them.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't be selling them. I'd be waiting for momentum to build. I put Jordan Love in the same category right now. It seems like it's a foregone conclusion that he should be their starter unless he just absolutely doesn't show up in spring or in preseason or something. But those two guys, my fear is if they come out week 1 and then week 2 and they're just not good, which is a high probability in my opinion, even just because they haven't played much. They could still be good quarterbacks. I think there could be a huge fall off. There could be a huge sell off and prices could come crashing down. And then you're left sitting there going, what do I do? Do I get out now? Do I still believe in them? I typically don't like to put myself in that position, but I know plenty of people who do, and they've done pretty well with that.
It's high risk, high reward. I would suggest that Ritter does not have the same level of attention or expectation as Jordan Love currently has.
100%.
I completely agree with you with Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Following Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, it has been speculated now for 2 seasons that he's going to take over and be the guy.
Yeah.
Everyone's ready for him to be the guy. Someone like Ritter feels a little more under the radar. But once again, huge risk. Could absolutely not work out at all for Ritter. Not where I would be putting a lot of money. But if you're playing the speculation game, he falls in that category of players without high expectations. Could they become a star in the future? We'll see. Buying another category of current players who I'm focusing in on. Buying established star players who have not reached the mountaintop yet and are coming off a bad end to their year and have dipped sharply in price. So they have the upside of if they can get to MVP or they can get to championship, that there's a lot of upside for them. But there was a lot of expectation on them. Things haven't gone well. They've fallen hard, but they still have the talent and the potential to maybe realize that upside someday. I think Josh Allen falls into this category. I think Lamar Jackson falls into this category. Now, interestingly, Lamar did win an MVP award early on, but he seemed so far removed from that. It was been 3 seasons removed from that, I think, at this point. So I still think I think Lamar Jackson falls into that boat. Luka, John Morant, how their seasons ended. There may be some off-season buying opportunities with those guys. It is a risk, but I'm looking at those 4.
Yep.
You've got, those are 4 of the best talents in their leagues. 4 of the best.
Yep.
And you've got guys that all ended their years in very disappointing fashions, and all of their card prices, have been down. Lamar got a recent bump because of the big contract and Baltimore's draft, but for the most part, all of their card prices have sagged a bunch, in recent months. I think that there might be some upside with them.
Josh Allen in particular is one for me that's tough to predict, because 2018 in particular for football products was like one of the lowest production print run years out there. Less than 2017. There's way more 2017 Prism stuff than 2018 Prism football. And Josh Allen, if you go and look at his prices, are still about double where Joe Burrow is. Right. A lot of it has to do with pop count.
Pop counts are so much lower. The pop counts are like a 5th.
Yes,
on his
exactly.
2018 Prism base rookie card.
Yep.
PSA 10 versus Burrow's 2020 PSA 10 Prism base. It's about a 5th.
Yes, exactly. And then you get the situation where he's about half or less of what, Mahomes is on different cards. And so it's tough. If he doesn't, I don't think there's going to be a lot of hype and momentum around Allen this year or this summer.
I would agree.
I'm going to be watching his prices. I don't expect them to fall off a cliff. But if he comes out and the Bills just dominate that division again, after the Aaron Rodgers trade, with, the Patriots making moves and always being the Patriots, with the Dolphins, and we don't know who the quarterback situation is going to be like, but obviously a lot of talent there. If the Bills just come out and start running away with that division, people may start believing in Josh Allen again, and there may be some momentum. I think we can expect at best flat or even a continuous trickle down on his card prices until that time, and then you have to make a decision, right?
And I think everyone's going to be worried. They're going to want to see it in the playoffs, because the Bills did come out at the beginning of last season and absolutely dominate. I mean, they looked unbeatable the first several weeks of the season. They faltered a little bit down the stretch, but they were still one of the favorites heading into they still were the favorite, really. Yeah. Maybe the Chiefs were the favorite, but they were still up there heading into the playoffs. And then, of course, early exit.
Yep.
Not the ending to the season that Bills fans were hoping for, which now follows a pattern of that occurring.
Yeah. When you take a guy like Luka, it's very interesting, because I just think that whole situation's in flux. And people don't know, is he going to be with Dallas long term? Where is he going to wind up? Man, how that could shift things for his card prices and his whole situation if Dallas were to land, let's call it a complimentary superstar, not a Kyrie, who I don't think works with Luka, but somebody who could actually pair nicely with Luka. Or if he were to wind up going somewhere else and be on a big team, we could see a rejuvenation, back into his card prices. Right now, he's been the MVP favorite each of the last 3 seasons going into the NBA.
Yeah, and hasn't
which
won.
is remarkable, which just goes to show you it's not just sports card collectors and buyers. That's Vegas making odds saying this guy has insane statistical potential. Everybody loves his game, but he's got the whiny antics. He's had some injury stuff. He's takes shots sometimes he shouldn't. I got to see what's going to happen with him. He's so expensive. He's had all the pre-baked expectation. I'm more inclined to look at that next class of guys down a level than I would be at Luka right now, just because I worry about somebody else taking the throne from his, where people are projecting him.
Acuna was a guy who I put in this category in the offseason and bought some of his cards. Yeah. Very, very happy that I did. He's a guy who showed incredible potential, so much hype and excitement around him in 2020. Had the injury in 2021 that unfortunately, and he was playing well up until the injury. Yeah. Missed the Braves World Series run as a result of the injury. Comes back in 2022, not quite right. The numbers that he was putting up were not, comparable to those that he'd put up back when he was healthy. To me, he was one of those players who was like a rising star, then all of a sudden kind of fell backwards, and then I felt could become a rising star again. Yeah. And here he is. He's off to a great start right now, leading the way for the Braves. The Braves are off to a hot start, and his cards have shot up. And, so I hope we would see that from some of these other guys. But obviously, once again, anytime you're dealing with current players, you're in a category of risk,
Yep.
a big category of risk. And all of these things that I'm saying right now are speculative. They're speculative. I see them as short term. I see them as, maybe you get in on Josh Allen, the Bills are 6-0 or 8-0, and there's an opportunity to unload with a 30 or 40% profit. That's more so what I see this as when we're looking at these short-term players. I'm not buying Josh Allen to hold for 12 years. I'd be buying Josh Allen for the short-term game.
Without going too far down the rabbit hole, I'll ask you a question. How does your strategy differ, if it does at all, across those three different sports, basketball, baseball, and football? Because to me, there's a lot of nuance within each of them and different ways of attacking it. Specifically short term, let's say a year or less. Does your approach differ at all on those?
That's an interesting question. I think that you see more short-term fluctuation. I think you see the most short-term fluctuation based on the results of a single game or two in football.
Absolutely.
Because football, you got the Sundays, everybody's concentrated on it. It's the big game of the week.
Yep.
If a guy throws for 5 touchdowns, his cards could be up 20 or 30% the next week.
Yeah.
Basketball, you see it more associated with either big splashy headlines. A player went for 50, a player went for 60, or you see it obviously on a team that gets really hot, like, how the Grizzlies started the year, those types of things, right? Baseball is a little more of a slow grind.
Yeah.
Baseball, you've got to be kind of doing it repeatedly over the course of the season and, get your team into the playoff position and all that kind of stuff.
There's so many games in baseball. It's hard for one game to make an impact, but there does seem to be something where people wake up one day and they go, oh, whoa, Acuna's on pace for 40-40. He's actually looking like he's going to hit it. Like, Acuna's on pace for 40-60. Like that starts getting hype. And I think a lot of it has to do with the headlines and what the sports media and all the journalists and everybody are reporting, because it can be easy to lose track of single performances throughout the season. Obviously, once you hit the All-Star break, there can also be a lot of kind of like recapping what's been going on this season. The home run derby can drive some attention, and the game itself even is much better than other leagues' All-Star games. So yeah, baseball's an interesting one. I feel like there's an opportunity in a time like now, from when the season starts to the second half of the season, to watch guys and see the ones who might be flying under the radar with their prices. Like Pete Alonso's one right now, who's just raking, absolutely raking. And he doesn't get the attention in terms of his card prices that he probably should for how good he's playing.
Yeah, I would agree. And by the way, as we're moving through this strategy, I also want to emphasize what I'm really trying to perfect here is the categories, less so the individual players, because the individual players will come and go. And we could debate all day long whether, Lamar Jackson is somebody who anyone should whiff, or should take a whiff of from an investment standpoint or not, or maybe they will whiff on him from an investment standpoint. But it's really the categories that I think are interesting. Like whoever you choose to put in the category of an established star player who hasn't reached a mountaintop and is coming off a bad end to the year and the prices have dipped a lot, but has upside potential of potentially doing much better in future years. Like whoever falls into that category for you, I think is potentially a good buy, right?
I'm glad you made that disclaimer, because I'm sure the comments are already, Davis Mills, really?
Yeah.
So yes, thank you for the disclaimer to clarify you're outlining a strategy that somebody else can identify people within and plug in and say, yeah, I agree with that.
Next category, and this one you might argue with me on, don't buy players who have reached the mountaintop already and still have several playing years ahead. They have more short-term downside than upside. And this is my Patrick Mahomes example. Mahomes has 2 Super Bowls now, MVP awards, Super Bowl MVP awards. I don't think Mahomes adding a 3rd Super Bowl is going to do a whole lot for his card prices. Now, if he goes on and wins 5 or 6, if he's on a pace that perhaps he catches Brady at some point, that's certainly going to fuel his card prices. But a 3rd, I don't know that a 3rd by itself does a whole lot for his card prices. Yet Mahomes has downside. And the downside is that he doesn't get back to the Super Bowl for the next couple of seasons. All of a sudden, Cincinnati kind of surges and it's Burrow who makes the next 2. or Buffalo surges and it's Josh Allen who makes
Yeah.
the next two, or Jacksonville surprises everyone and Trevor Lawrence makes it,
Or the Lions
the
and
Charger,
Jared Goff
right,
is the best
exactly.
quarterback in the league.
So the downside is it looks like Mahomes is kind of getting passed, or it looks like the Chiefs are kind of getting passed by another team. Now, that may not happen. The Chiefs are entering this season, I think, still as the favorites to win the Super Bowl again. But I feel like there's more downside than upside at this moment, short term, for Mahomes. I feel the same. You saw the same play out over the last couple of seasons with Giannis.
It's just, yeah.
You saw the same play out with Kawhi Leonard.
Yep.
I worry a little bit. Ohtani's not in this category yet, but I actually do worry that Ohtani could enter this category because his stuff has been so red hot. Now, and the Angels have no chance of doing anything. Now, he does have the additional potential upside that he gets dealt and he ends up as a Yankee or something, which then just raises his total upside ceiling.
Yeah.
Short of that happening, though, I worry a little bit about Ohtani. Now he could win a second MVP this year. Maybe there's a little something there, but so I don't think Ohtani's in that category yet. But I think at some point, you may be looking at Ohtani and going, he's won multiple MVPs. He's reached a mountaintop. He's on a non-competitive team. Winning another MVP is not going to do a whole lot for him. Yet if he starts to fall off, his skills start to fall off at all. If he at some point decides he's not going to pitch anymore because of the wear and tear on the body, and granted, hopefully all that stuff is years away, but I'm just thinking long term. But I think in the short term, Matthew Stafford was another guy who, coming off the Super Bowl victory, has clearly fallen into that camp.
Yeah.
I feel like once people hit that mountaintop, if they're current and they have years ahead, there's oftentimes more downside than upside. I'd stay away from these guys.
I wouldn't put Stafford quite into the same category because he was never the guy in the league. It was actually sort of a nice thing that he went and made a change and immediately won a Super Bowl. And then, like you said, he had a hard fall off statistically. Where he will fit into people's best quarterbacks of his respective generation, I don't know. I think highly of him for all the grit he gave the Lions for so many years and then winning a Super Bowl. But last year did not help his situation. It was like the exact opposite. It was like when Manning had that record-breaking season with the Broncos and then the next year just stunk, but then won the Super Bowl somehow. Ohtani's interesting because baseball, unlike the other sports, this is the nuance piece, is really this counting stats thing, especially with WAR and the Hall of Fame eligibility and the long-term prospect. Ohtani right now, as of right now, is on pace for roughly a 13 WAR this season, which would be unreal, absolutely unreal. And that's why I like him. He's generating WAR on the pitching side and on the hitting side. He's one of the Cy Young favorites as of right now, and he's hitting the ball not spectacularly, but better right now than he did to start the season last year. Injury or a drop-off in performance certainly could impact him, but I see the probability being higher for him in the short term. I was thinking about Giannis the same way you just described and reflecting, especially after him getting bounced in the first round, missing 2 games with the back injury, but losing the 3 games that they played. As a fan of Giannis, as a huge fan of Giannis, that hurt, that stung. It just wasn't what you want to see. That was the worst case scenario for him, and especially for his card prices. Now, I was just more chewed up about, I think, his legacy and what I think he means to the league and to sports fans than like his card prices. But to your point, that can definitely impact them and bring those prices down significantly. He has been so high. He's been so high, and he's continued to see this tick down. This may shock you, but I actually don't think you're wrong about Mahomes right now. It almost feels like best case scenario, he holds. Like he holds price. Now, it's a huge, almost unlikely improbability for him to come out and win the Super Bowl next year. Back-to-back is super tough, especially to win it the next 2 years. If he somehow did that and won this year and the next year,
Sure.
I think you literally have reached a point where prices are going to hold for a long time. But you have a lot of these all-time great players. Go back to Peyton Manning, and I've brought up how I feel like his cards are irrationally underpriced compared to Tom Brady's. How many years were there where a majority of people were arguing that Manning, not Brady, was the better of the 2 quarterbacks? And then what happened? Manning's neck and back had problems later in his career. His career ends, and Brady goes and plays like 7 more seasons and wins several more Super Bowls. And suddenly everybody's like, oh my gosh, he's the GOAT. Obviously, it's the longevity, the championships, all the things. And people kind of forgot about Peyton Manning. In spite of everything he's done post-career and how funny and hilarious and everything else, his prices have come down significantly. He would have been in that same category as really what Mahomes is right now, short of having won the Super Bowls early in his career, because he only ended up winning 2.
Yeah. No, these are all great points. Yeah, it gives you a lot to think about for sure. I agree Manning is completely undervalued. And in this category of, players who, have reached the mountaintop and then may not have a lot to gain, I'm even worried about guys like LeBron. And we've seen it the last couple of seasons, right?
Yeah.
Steph Curry. This year may be different. We'll see for both of those guys, this year may be different. The fact that one of them is going to advance to the, conference finals is a great thing. And maybe they'll get a chance to go on to the NBA finals. That's going to be a great thing for them. I'm really excited about that, but only one of them will.
Yeah.
It's sad they have to play each other this round.
Go Warriors.
Yeah. But, we've seen both of their card prices take a slide, over the last year or so. And, a guy like Tom Brady, when it became clear this last season with the Bucs, they were down, his performance was down, retirement started to look more inevitable. People realized he wasn't going to win another ring. This was probably it. Then his cards had gone down and down, right? So, I think even the all-time greats, there's still concern that when they finally hang it up, or as they get towards the end of the career and it's pretty obvious that they're not going to win anything else, there's still, even they can see drops of 20, 30, 50% or more. Now, some of that obviously has been heightened by the fact that the entire sports card market has come down so significantly. LeBron James's drop was heightened by the fact that he was possibly the most hot card in 2019, 2020, right? They went on and won in the bubble that year. So his cards were peaking at the peak of the sports card market. So LeBron maybe had the highest to fall, of anybody, and he has.
Yeah.
And so, maybe that's an extreme example, but I worry with any player who and I have a ton of LeBron cards and a ton of Steph Curry cards, and I'm going to hold on to them for a very long time. But I do think that if I had waited to buy, LeBron or Steph Curry, perhaps until 2 or 3 years after their retirement, or maybe as they're finally hanging it up, they're in their final season or two, their play has decreased, their team's not competitive, and it's obvious they're kind of at the end, that's actually probably the better moment to buy than at any point during, the last few seasons as they've been having, ring after ring after ring.
So now I have to ask you the question. You had a video this last year, I don't remember when it was, I'm sure you do, talking about cutting your losses.
Yeah.
This isn't really a cut your losses, though I'm sure some of those cards are definitely down from when you've bought them. Would you consider selling any of those cards? I'm sure you're not moving on from your gold LeBron.
Right.
But would you consider moving on from some of those cards that you could get back later?
Yeah.
And putting it into something else now and just waiting for a few years?
Well, that's actually a great transition. The answer is yes. And it's a great transition to talking about what type of cards I want to hold for the long term. Because one mistake that I made that I, am in the process of trying to go back and correct and wish I had done things differently was I didn't buy cards that were rare enough. I didn't buy cards that were sought after enough. I didn't buy cards that necessarily iconically are going to hold the test of time. Yeah. Instead of buying, I thought it was really cool that I bought all of LeBron's Topps Chrome refractors from all of the different years. And I think that is cool. And some of them are very low population in PSA 10s. I bought them all in PSA 10. Some are very low population, like population 10.
Yeah.
But the people out there who are really caring about chasing that, 2000 and which one's the pop 10? I think it's the 2007 LeBron James Topps Chrome refractor. That's a pop 10 card in PSA 10. But the people who really care about chasing that's not the one they're going to chase. They're going to go chase the gold.
Yeah.
They're going to go chase the gold number to 50. They're going to go chase, maybe some of the other parallels. They're not going to necessarily chase the refractor. So yeah, the refractor is lower pop, But does that mean much to the high-end collector who's trying to get the best they can? They're going to want the lowest numbered parallel they can get, or they're going to want the gold because that's so iconic across all those years. So yeah, the answer is I've thought about selling some of those, and I would be taking a loss on a lot of those cards, but I've thought about selling them and just and upgrading. The rookie stuff, I like having the complete rookie rainbow. I won't sell any of the stuff from 2003.
Yeah.
But the other years, I thought about like, yeah, maybe I sell my refractors from 04 through 09. And then I really try to go after the golds from each year or something of that nature. And then, even if they're in a slightly lower grade, but go after the golds or just pool up money until I can get the golds and high grades every year.
You're sort of admitting something here, which is that, like, I think every single person in the hobby, you got a little caught up in the like refractor silver prism craze, the PSA 10 refractor craze. Many of us did. And I know I did in terms of the speculation aspect of it. One of the cards that I've seen come up over and over and over again is like the 2018 Prism Silver Tom Brady PSA 10.
Yeah.
That I don't have the exact numbers, but was
Sold
like
for like 20 grand.
It was like 20K and
yeah.
it's down to like 1,200 or less than that or something, right? It just fell off a cliff. We've seen these, ebbs and flows. The bigger thing too with LeBron and the timing of buying him and everything is doing a heat check on the card. And shameless plug for market movers, this is why having data that goes back much further than 90 days or even a year, like you can get out of Terapeak, is so valuable because you can see where has a card been, how sharply, looking at the graph, how sharply has this gone up. I bet if we were to do a deep dive, and maybe I need to do this at some point, into like slope analysis and how quickly a chart, shifts up, you would see a correlation to how quickly it comes back down in many cases. So when you're thinking about a guy like LeBron, many of his cards went shooting way up. If you're thinking about those players long term, it's once their career is over, there's very little that can happen short of tragedy or something incredible that's going to add that jet fuel to like fuel their prices back up really quickly. That's what we talk about with vintage and things long term holding their value. So you could have been looking at those guys, and maybe there's the lesson there on the next few generations. Maybe it's Mahomes, maybe it's Ohtani, where you're looking and going, I just don't think I want to hold these for the long term because of how much money I've got into them. I'm going to sell them now, and I can try to buy back into them later. The one nice thing about like refractors and those things is if you are looking to speculate, not during a hype cycle for that particular variation or something, is that they are liquid. Mm-hmm. And they are the more commodity type card that people know they have a recent comp for. Okay, not the LeBron PSA 10 Pop 10, but the newer stuff. There's a reason why these Prism Silvers and Optic Hollows and things, they move. They move. Yeah. Because one sold yesterday, and so I have comp confidence saying, yes, I will pay 5%, even 10% more today than yesterday because I know I can get out of it quickly. If you buy the gold Trevor Lawrence Prism card and you say, I'm buying it with the hopes of flipping this card before the season starts because I think of hype, maybe you can. Maybe you'll have some success doing that at a card show, trading in person or doing something like that. But if you're put into a situation where you need to list that online, you're making a decision either to send it to an auction house or put it on auction yourself and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, or you're putting it out there for a buy it now and maybe you get 1 million watchers and a bunch of lowball offers and you can't actually move it, then you're in a really, really tough position. So it all depends on what your goals are. If it's for the long term, I agree. Buying the cards that you can certainly afford, don't overstretch, but have more meaning and more stability long term to the higher end audience is going to be your best bet.
I totally agree. And I think what's killed the refractors is the fact, so back in the 2000s and in the 1990s, the refractors were very tough.
Yeah.
They were low population cards, especially in good grades. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I was so attracted to all the LeBron refractors. All those 2000s tops refractors are all pretty low population cards in high grades. But what's killed it is 2019 and 2020 and 2021 and 2022 when Panini started making a zillion Prism Silvers and it devalued the concept of the silver or the refractor in the average collector's mind. Because now there's 2,000 Luka Silvers and 2,000 Zion Silvers in PSA 10. And so now the 2008 LeBron refractor silver must not be very valuable or must not be very noteworthy
Very
because
important.
silvers are so common today.
Yeah.
I actually think that killed it.
Yeah.
Golds, on the other hand, has done the opposite.
Yeah.
Golds, Panini's left those as out of 10s, and those have become increasingly hard to pull because now they're producing more and more product, but they're still only creating 10 golds, right? So there's a big, and they played some games now by creating
Shimmer, fast break,
shimmers or whatever,
pulsar.
but they're still very, very difficult, sought after cards.
Yes.
I think the fact that golds are more chased today than ever before has helped the price of some of the golds, from the 2000s and that kind of thing, right? So unfortunately, those types of effects can happen. I think that's hurt the refractor market from back then. I want to go back to your comment on liquid because wrapping up the current players, and then I want to talk about my strategy with retired players. The cards that I am specifically buying for these current players who we just talked about, guys like Jalen Hurts, who I'm, buying up right now. I am buying liquid and widely desirable cards. The combination of the two: kabooms, color blasts, downtowns, and stained glass. Number one for me. These are number one for me because they're short prints. So there's not a ton of them out there. People absolutely go bananas over these, and every kid I see on a show floor wants to chase these. Adults love building sets of these. People are just incredibly attracted to those cards. Yep. Kabooms, color blast, downtown, stained glass in particular. Serial numbered prism cards, always sought after, it seems. Less so serial numbered optic cards and less so serial numbered select cards. Select has watered itself down, all the different levels and all that kind of stuff. Still some value there, though, in the serial numbered cards. Staying away from, and in baseball, serial numbered or refractor autograph specifically. Topps Chrome, Topps Sapphire, Bowman Chrome. That's where I'm looking in baseball. Staying away from base cards altogether. Staying away from silver cards or refractors without autographs because they become so common. And I'm staying away for the most part from flawless and national treasures because, in the high end sets because of a couple things. First of all, so many different variations. Like you've got flawless. There's the number to 5, the number to 10, the number to 15, the number to 20, the number to 25. National treasures is now doing the same thing. The horizontals, the verticals, the number to 49, the midnight variation, the stars and stripes. Yeah. So it's so there's so much there now. Mm-hmm. Patch quality can affect price big. You're looking just for a very, very high-end buyer there. It's as a result of all these things, comps are not as consistent. It's not as liquid. I think you're better off going and buying a PSA 10 Kaboom rookie, which is still in many cases going to be a $5,000, $10,000 card than you are buying a National Treasures horizontal RPA number to 49 or something of that nature, simply because of the liquidity. I'm not saying what card looks nicer. I'm not saying what card might be more sought after in 20 years. I'm just simply saying, if you're going to buy and you're going to sell when things are going up, I think the Kaboom is the better choice for that.
Yeah. I mean, I touched on those 4 inserts during the video that I did highlighting football players, specifically looking at Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and saying it's easy to use Prism Silver, Optic Hollow, something like that as like a baseline to compare to other players. But it's also not easy because the pop counts are so low in the first few years for these guys, especially in light of grading having been slow and closed and everything over the last few years, that it's really not comparing apples to apples. And I think we can fully expect that there's going to be more PSA 10 Prism Silvers flooding for those guys, flooding the market. So I suggested going after some of the cards you just described because there's also a mystique around them in terms of what the actual print runs are. There's definitely more than what there were in years past.
You can see that in the pop report.
You can see it for sure in Kabooms. They start putting them into the blaster boxes as a chase and all those things. But there's still mystique and there's still enough to be able to compare a guy like Joe Burrow to Trevor Lawrence or something like that and say, here's what I think the upside is. The one piece I think I might disagree with on, actually I do, is specifically around the Prism Silvers and Optic Hollows, those two, in a PSA 9 or better across the grading companies. So all of them, but let's say a 9 or better, just because of the commoditized liquidity aspect of it to get in and get out. So if I'm looking at a guy like Jalen Hurts, I just bought a PSA 9 Prism Silver of Jalen Hurts. That may or may not go up, but I'm speculating on it, knowing I'm going to bring this to the National with me. I'm going to wait until the season gets ready to start and just see what happens with his prices, because one way or another, that card does move. Those cards move. It might not go to the moon, but I also don't think there's going to be like another discrediting of Prism Silvers or Optic Hollows between now and then that would cause that card, independent of Jalen Hurts' market, to somehow crash. Like there was fire on those a few years ago and people super, super excited about it. Other sets, other parallels, like I'd rather have a Prism Silver or an Optic Hollow right now than some of the more wonky two-colored parallels that come out of retail and do other things, or maybe even some of the numbered ones that just don't look good. So that's kind of the one piece I would differ on, but I think everything else you said makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that feedback. That I agree. That makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about retired players. Retired players, best for long-term investing. When I'm looking at where I'm going to park money, where I'm going to buy cards and put them in the safe or vault and look at them 30 years from now and feel like I've got something really special, it's going to be retired players, and it's going to be absolute GOATs. It's going to be like Mount Rushmore of the sport type of players. I have shrunk the window of players that I am willing to look at so significantly over time as I've really seen this play out. There are 4 players in particular who I think, to me, are the most interesting and compelling because how they have transcended beyond sport. The first 3 especially. Michael Jordan, no surprise there, because not just being the greatest basketball player of all time, but also the shoes, the cultural influence, all that type of thing. Jackie Robinson, I think some of his cards are underappreciated. Retired, the only retired number throughout baseball, breaking the color barrier, so much woven into American history with Jackie Robinson. He will continue to be talked about in history books 100 years from now, 500 years from now, whereas some of these other players, even a Mickey Mantle, his cultural influence is going to lessen over time, where I don't think Jackie Robinson will because of his place in American history. Tiger Woods, best young golfer ever, obviously minority, stood out from the pack in terms of that, and ushered in a whole new era of people paying attention to golf and turning golf into must-watch television, as well as people playing golf. Like Tiger Woods, I think, single-handedly was responsible for a lot of the growth of golf in this country during the 2000s.
Yeah.
Those 3 guys, to me, I love because they go beyond sports. Not only are they the best, but they also go beyond sports. Bill Russell was one I hadn't paid as much attention to. Obviously, upon his death, learning a lot about him, understanding his role in civil rights and everything like that, he's compelling as well, because he was much more than just one of the greatest basketball players ever to live. Those 4 to me are kind of my 1A of like, I want to be buying these cards for the long run, and I'll talk about specifically which ones. Then you get down to my next level, which with baseball is Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, Lou Gehrig, Ken Griffey Jr. Those are the guys I'm buying. Now, there's other guys I think you could put in the same category: Ty Cobb, Ted Williams, Hannes Wagner, Joe DiMaggio, Pete Rose, Nolan Ryan, Derek Jeter. I think all those guys kind of fall into that same type of category. I'm not as interested in those guys. The other guys mean a little more to me. I didn't put any steroid era guys on there. You could argue Bonds or, should be on that list, or a McGuire or somebody like that, or Clemens. But to me, that's it. Like those are the ones for baseball that I'm looking at. And it's just concentrated to that. Like I'm not looking beyond that list anymore. I used to buy a lot more players. I own A-Rod's best rookie card, for example. And, I own a wider swath of players. But to me, like, if you really want to concentrate in and you really want to go for the GOATs, which is your best long-term, it's Babe, it's Ruth, it's Mays, it's Aaron, it's Mantle, it's Gehrig. And I put Griffey on there, not because he's quite at the same level as those other guys. Certainly doesn't have the championships, but he has so much relevancy in our generation growing up, right?
Absolutely. Griffey's prices, if you look at 90s cards, trump everybody significantly. I mean, significantly. I think you're hitting on something that's really important. And like you said, just to reiterate, this is investment, not collecting. Because I think when I think collecting, I cast such a wide net across so many different sports and non-sports things and other things. That's where it can be a lot of fun as a collector to get really good steals on players who were all-time greats. There's one guy who would be interesting that you didn't mention who falls into the same category but lesser known with Jackie Robinson and Bill Russell, and that's Jim Brown.
Yeah.
Jim Brown is another one who's definitely an all-time great.
Yeah.
People argue him in the top 3 to top 4 greatest running backs of all time. And he was also very involved in that civil rights, activity and everything. And he's got a very iconic rookie card. So he's a guy to potentially add onto that list, especially if you think football becomes this, even more iconic collecting sport. You could see that scenario where some, kids' dads are going back and maybe they're not that age, but they're going, well, yeah, I want to go after some of these older all-time greats. Jim Brown is one, but bigger picture, what's so important is that you're talking about focus. And focus when you're investing, when you're speculating or investing, and you're doing anything for the purposes of growing the value of what you're buying. Focus is so, so key. Focus on the specific parallel. Focus on the specific player. Focus on the specific sport or era or product. All of those things are critical, and you formulated a really clear strategy that I think anybody who's listening to this can use as a foundation and a template to go and do the same things for themselves.
I'll give you the other players I have, and these aren't really, everyone may have a slightly different list. I'm just kind of giving my opinion. For basketball, I obviously already mentioned Jordan and Bill Russell, but beyond them, it's Kareem, it's Magic Johnson, it's Wilt Chamberlain, Larry Bird, Shaq, and Kobe.
Yep.
That's it for me for basketball. And of course, I'm not counting current players. I'm not counting LeBron and Steph, who I would actually put on that list as well. But that's it for me. And there's other players you could argue should be on there, like Hakeem or whoever. But for me, it's those guys. For football, for me, it's Jim Brown, as you said, Tom Brady, Jerry Rice, Elway, maybe Marino, Manning, Peyton Manning. I'm going to put Barry Sanders on there. Even though he doesn't have the championship pedigree, I'm going to put Drew Brees on there, even though you may argue he's not quite the same level as some of those others. But Brees and Sanders were both super relevant to me, during my consumption. Joe Montana should be on there as well. Walter Payton should be on there. Maybe Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah.
That's the football list to me.
I think something really interesting as you're stratifying this and you're going down to, you're broadening your pyramid, so to speak, and you're getting to players of a slightly lower caliber, right? Is that if you were to focus then on one of those players, a Drew Brees, I would imagine, you tell me if I'm wrong, that you're definitely lasering in on a super high-end card of that player.
The very best.
Versus a more commoditized card, because the pool of people desiring those cards of that player is going to be less. And so getting the one that nobody else can have creates a more long-term sustainable demand for those players.
It's funny that you mentioned Drew Brees, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I just bought Drew Brees' absolute top, definitively best card of all time, and there's only 5 of them that exist in the world.
Whoa.
Number 1. Because with a player like Brees, you can do that. $18,000. 2001 playoff contenders, Drew Brees, rookie auto, PSA 10 auto 10. Pop 5 as a PSA 10 auto 10. There's more just in PSA 10. But there's only 5 in a PSA 10 auto 10, and there's not a lot more just in PSA 10. Definitively his best card. The one that has outsold all the others.
Yeah.
It's his absolute best card.
Yeah.
And in a 1010, it is absolutely his best card, and there's only 5 of them in a 1010 that exist.
Yeah.
I picked it up at PWCC. It was in a weekly auction a couple of months ago, sold for $18,000, which was right around the same price it sold for at the beginning of 2019. It had sold for I think the mid to upper 40s in 2021. That's how crazy it had gotten. And like many cards, it's come down a bunch since then. But that's the perfect example, because as we talk about my philosophy with these players, what has really changed, and I had a really great conversation with Marshall Fogel about this when I was in Denver. My philosophy about investing in all-time great players and retired players is go for the highest quality cards possible. Fewer cards, fewer players, fewer cards, by the highest quality you can. Marshall Fogel is a big advocate that you're better off owning just a few cards of the absolute highest quality than owning a whole bunch of cards of lesser grades, lesser qualities, or wide. Also, go for the key items people want. Don't go too wide. The rookie cards are obvious,
Yep.
or the most iconic cards of a particular player. If you go wide and you start collecting all of the players' different cards from their 13th year and whatever, you're really limiting the pool of people who are going to care about that.
Yep.
But if you just go for the most iconic card and you just go for the highest possible grade, you're likely going to do really, really well over the long term. I love cards where I love when you can get in on a card and it's a real small population and it's definitively like the best card or a super special card. The Drew Brees I just gave the example of.
Yep.
PSA 10 Auto 10, Pop 5, definitively his best card. I've got one of the only 5 best Drew Brees cards in the world. I've got it. I love on-card autos because I feel like they especially for vintage cards, I feel like they offer some uniqueness. Babe Ruth, for example, there's, a few thousand of Babe Ruth's Gaudy cards in existence, the total graded population across all 4 of his Gaudy cards. If you combine it all together, there's a few thousand of those across all the various grades, PSA, SGC. But there's only 27, I believe, Babe Ruth Gaudy cards across all 4 cards that have ever had an authenticated Babe Ruth autograph on the card. 27. Whereas there's a few thousand, Gaudis in general. You very rarely see those come up for auction. One of those came up for auction a year or so ago. I bid on it. I didn't win. It pains me to this day. I'd love to own Babe Ruth, Gaudy, on-card, auto, any of them. I'd love to own all 4 of them. But, that's real crazy because I think one of the 4 variations, there's only 2 that have ever been authenticated with an on-card auto. So, the chance of getting one of those is real slim. But that's kind of a way you can, so either you got to go high grade, right? I got to go real high grade so I can take that population of a few thousand Gaudy Babe Ruths and even it down to just a small number and say, I got one of these small number of cards, or something like the on-card auto does the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting play. But yeah, I'm definitely going for the scarcest, the highest quality, the most key things I can find now and less. And I've actually been selling a lot of cards. I've been on a selling spree over the last 6 months, and then I've been reinvesting it. I've been building up capital and I've been putting it towards, I'm actually in the process. I told our video producer, Charles, our head of production, that I'm in the process of selling a bunch of cards off because I'm building cash up for the National, because I want to be able to go buy a few really key cards at the National. And I'm willing to part with a lot of non-key cards in my collection in order to just go after like a few key ones I really want.
A couple of things that are really important here. One, we've been talking about collecting versus investing, but these 2 things are not mutually exclusive. And you can definitely enjoy a time of having had a card. And then it's okay. It's completely okay to one day go, you know what? I don't quite desire to have this card as much as I used to. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to move on. Or I've had to make a tough decision and I want to move for this card because I want to get into that card. Maybe there's somebody out there listening with a signed Gaudy Babe Ruth who wants to trade you for a LeBron refractor run. You never know. You've done similar trades in the past that were, crazy like that. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that you can buy things with the purpose of hoping that they increase in value over time, but also because you enjoy it more. And that, if I were you too, I'd be in the same boat with the Drew Brees. Some people like to only collect one player. They want all Jordan, all LeBron, all insert, Mike Trout, all whomever, right? That's okay too. Knowing your style is really important. Knowing your collector style is really important if that's what you want to do, and you focused in on that. I think there's even ways, a lot of the cards that you're talking about may not be attainable for a lot of people, but there's, again, still ways to take those principles and apply them to cards that are even of a next tier down for a lot of these players that you're hitting on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are. And I think like in the case of Jackie Robinson, for example, because he's one of those absolute top guys on my list. I'm going to be scouting for his cards at the National this year. His 1948 Leaf is the one that everybody cues in on, considered his rookie card.
Yep.
But his 1956 Topps is absolutely a beautiful card, right? a lot less money than his 1948 Leaf or his, there's other cards of his. 54 Tops is a nice card. There's other cards of his from other years, which still are significant enough where they're going to hold a lot of collector interest over time. But you may not be able to afford his 48 Leaf, but maybe you can afford a 56 Tops. And that's still a card that, in my opinion, because of the iconic nature of the 56 Top set, that's going to have that's going to do well for you if you buy that card and tuck it away for, the next 20 years.
Yeah. There's one other piece that you haven't touched on at all that I think is an interesting approach too, and maybe some people would be into it, is looking for players who are all-time greats, maybe in a sport, or who for one reason or another just haven't caught on yet. And this, again, it's all about probabilities and upside and where do you want to park money and all of these things. I mentioned Jim Brown. His cards aren't cheap.
Yeah.
Jim Brown's cards are not cheap, but he could rise in popularity. You brought up that I was high on Pele for the last 2 years, and he's seen popularity increase. Are there other athletes, who sort of transcend and who are on those all-time great lists, whose prices relative to others just they're not blown up like crazy? A guy like Sugar Ray Robinson, for example, in boxing, is one. Muhammad Ali's cards are very expensive. Depending who you talk to, I'm not a boxing expert at all, and I won't pretend to be, but I watched some boxing. There are a number of people who say Sugar Ray Robinson's the greatest boxer of all time, not Muhammad Ali, not Mike Tyson, not a number of other guys, but Sugar Ray Robinson. And his cards are very affordable for vintage cards in low population compared to others. I have a couple of his cards. So he's just an example. I'm just bringing him up as there's a category of guys, and maybe in the next tier, if you were super bullish on soccer or super bullish on football or super bullish on something else, some of these guys that you brought up, not necessarily vintage, but like you brought up Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, if somebody's really high on those and it's a sport they appreciate and it's a collection, there could also be opportunities where some of those players get, even more notoriety over time. Another guy that's really interesting to me, like two guys, really like Bruce Smith.
Yeah.
Bruce Smith, Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White, Bruce Smith, like put those three guys into a category for three of the best pass rushers of all time. Bruce Smith's cards are not expensive.
Yeah.
They're very cheap. So it's just sort of a question. It's not, I'm not saying that his cards will definitively go up. Maybe they could go down long term. But anytime I find guys who fit squarely within like the top 5 for a really important position in a sport of all time, or top lists, and it's hard to see them getting knocked down a rung statistically, in the very least, they kind of intrigue me. So he's another one that I might think about.
Interesting. Yeah.
Tim Duncan also.
Tim Duncan. Yeah. I was going to actually go. Tim Duncan I was thinking about Tim Duncan.
And I want to just throw this question out there because Tim Duncan has just never been a favorite.
Right.
Because his game wasn't flashy or
Right.
sexy or exciting. It was just the fundamental. He was so fundamental. There's still a long way to go for this. But right now, Tim Duncan, I think, would fall for sure in almost everybody's top 10 of all time and number one power forward pretty clearly. Giannis could pass him. Giannis could pass him as the greatest power forward of all time. Some people think he's already on that path and on that trajectory. If Giannis, much like Steph Curry now, is creeping into many people's top 10 list of all time and even top point guard of all time conversation, if Giannis were to become the greatest power forward, kind of, in most people's eyes, do you think that would hurt Tim Duncan's card prices a lot? Whereas the upside with Tim Duncan is maybe just that he right now is the best power forward ever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know why Tim Duncan doesn't get more love, but that's interesting. Interesting questions.
It wouldn't be bad to have a really nice, iconic,
Yeah.
comparable to what you have for the Breeze of Duncan. I think most people would like to have that in their collection.
So speaking of where the market is going and kind of thinking out, a couple of closing thoughts here as we wrap the conversation. I've been thinking a lot about 20 years from now, who are going to be the players who are going to be the most celebrated. And the one thing that really strikes me is that the dream team, they're all going to be in their 80s in 20 years. I mean, believe it or not, Jordan 60, Magic 63, Bird 66, Hakeem is 60. They're all going to be in their 80s in 20 years. Not all of them will probably be here in 20 years,
Yeah.
That's, to me, like, as I think about what's going to be celebrated when the NBA hits the NBA 100.
Yep.
the dream team is going to be like the NBA 100 celebration. I wouldn't be surprised if they focus a bunch of it on the dream team, because that's like the right point. It's almost going to be a farewell to some of those guys, right? And so that, to me, like dream team stuff right now, I think that's just got a lot of opportunity, because especially somebody like myself, that remembers that, that grew up during that and remembers how big of a deal that was, you know, like that's something I'm going to be thinking about 20 years from now. You know, it really was relevant in my life.
Right now you think about it. I know you've bought things, you've picked things up at the National, and people who remember that somewhere between my age bracket and your age bracket are going to be then either having senioritis and the retirement senioritis, or just having retired and going, well, maybe I got a little money burning a hole in my pocket. Maybe I've got a side gig that's funding my hobby. Maybe I'm doing something with sports cards. It's pretty insightful, actually, I think, because you're talking about the ebbs and flows, the waves of when people focus on different things, and you're zooming out very far. I mean, in my opinion, 20 years, and saying, okay, when do people have disposable income that they're willing to buy things with? You retire, you get a little bored, you want to go do something. That's not a bad insight, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I'm looking at, I'm thinking about that. Other guys who fall into that category: John Elway's 62, Joe Montana's 66, Jerry Rice is 60. I mean, talk about unbelievably iconic football players from the 80s, and you know, those guys 90s as well with Elway, especially. You know, those guys will be paid attention to, I think. Then Shaq's 51. So he's got a little while longer to go. But, you know, it's like, I'm just thinking about who those really iconic guys are who are going to be celebrated, you know, down the road. Final thing I want to close on, I've really come to appreciate the importance of storytelling when it comes to cards, and especially memorabilia, right? There's cards that have something more to them in terms of the story behind them, in my opinion, are so much more attractive and are likely to do better, you know, in the long run. Like I love getting to sit down with Marshall Fogel and go through all of his old sets. Like I've obviously had heard the story of 52 Tops before and the cases getting thrown in the ocean and all that kind of stuff, but getting to rehear that and live that, but also having him like talk about the story of like the play ball sets from 1939 and 1940 and 1941. I didn't know about the history of play ball, or, you know, Gaudy and how that came to be, or the pre-war cards, or there's these various sets, and especially various cards, like obviously the Hannes Wagner being a prime example of that. These cards that have just such a story and a folklore to them. Even the next level down of cards that, you know, aren't that level, but there's a mystique to them, like precious metal gems cards, for example, right? Very much fall in this boat. I think those cards are really fascinating. I love the storytelling. And I think it particularly applies with memorabilia and especially tickets. And you know, Darren Rovell has done a masterful job of building out a huge ticket collection. Patrick Ryan as well. And those guys are very into the storytelling behind the item. And I've really come to appreciate the storytelling behind the item. I think that that's an underappreciated aspect of cards and memorabilia collecting, and something that I'm concentrating more on is the story behind some of the items that I'm buying.
I think that storytelling is the single biggest opportunity that the sports card hobby has in general. There's an attention span issue with many of us, of all ages, frankly, at this point, but certainly the younger generation. So finding ways to tell a story in a compelling short bit. But then the Fogel video that we did, the long form one, has great viewership and incredible reviews and incredible comments. When it's done really well, which our video team always does, and when, you know, it's interviewed well, which you do, and when you have somebody like Marshall who's very endearing and tells a great story, it's engaging and people want to sit down and use their precious time for that. And then the thing that it does, and I think this is a good thing, this isn't a trick or something, it creates a connection for you with the card or the piece of memorabilia, and it makes you want it. Mm-hmm. It makes you want that card or that piece. This is where the big controversy, to go back to your last week's video, episode with Kelly about the influencer market and everything. We need more influencers. Now, That's a loaded statement.
Sure.
We need influencers doing the right thing and telling stories. And I hear people who are a little too lax with how they use that term influencer and critical, like it's a pejorative term, saying exactly that. And some of them are trying to do that. Some of them are definitely trying to tell stories. There are some people doing a really good job of that on Instagram and on YouTube. The more we can celebrate that, and what would be really cool, maybe this is something for us to think about product, or is like linking those stories to cards within a database, within an app, so that as you're exploring and you're going through it, if somebody's created a piece of content around the 48 Jackie Robinson or something like that, you can just hear a little bit about that story and why it means something to somebody.
That's interesting. I love that idea. We'll see what we can do with that. Teapot, I appreciate you. I appreciate your feedback and your insights here. You've definitely helped me think about some of the things in the strategy and strengthen pieces of it, and have given validation to some of it as well, which I appreciate.
I'm bummed I didn't get to vehemently disagree. I'll have to go look for something else to argue with you about, but we'll save that for cards on the table.
Good. Well, I got some work to do now. I got to refine this, and I got to start buying. I'm excited to continue to buy things off this list and with this focus in mind.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
It's been a fun episode. And for everybody out there, make sure you're subscribed to the Geoff Wilson Show on YouTube, as well as on podcast platforms, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the Geoff Wilson Show. And of course, follow me. It's Geoff Wilson on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for more clips from the show. Appreciate you watching. Take care.